in the mid 2000s. I had a really good relationship with the people over there. Of course, people change. And then John Doonan, who was the competition director at Mazda for many years, Mazda Motorsports, he's now over at IMSA.
Yeah.
He's a big cheese over there. He's one of the hardest working people I've ever met.
Seriously, intro the show, John, or we're going to miss everything.
Yeah, unfortunately, we got on here and we're just chatting away, and somebody goes, "Oh, we need to hit record," and I'm going, "It's not that we meant to record, forgot to. We just got carried away." You have Sean and John tonight, and we're pleased or honored to have Randy Pobst with us to chat about whatever Randy wants to. I met him, ironically, 4 or 5 years ago in conjunction with the Barber Vintage Fest and historic motorcycles, and I never put that together, but I knew the name instantly from back in my youth and in the 80s, and IMSA racing and Randy and such, and even said some things to some friends. I go, do you know, is Randy involved in motorcycles and that? Is this really the same guy? And we've become friends since I've left Barbers. We didn't see each other last year, but I think, I've been able to reach out to him and he's responded very well. We've had some hiccups get into this show and interview. Sean will probably dominate, being Sean's the racer of the group.
I don't even apologize for that. I'm not going to apologize for that.
But we want to take a little time to let Randy kind of say, if you can. We did this with Jim Simpson a couple of weeks ago in an episode and said, give us about a 2-minute synopsis, and 18 minutes later we were finishing up. But if you can give us, condense your career so that people have an idea of who you are. I know you do driving instruction, you do racing, you do off-road motorcycles. You're into some really odd cars when it comes down to it. I think you're recently or relaunching your YouTube channel and doing some YouTube presence, and you're staying busy through, again, we're recording this in the midst of the coronavirus, if you're listening to this in a few years, but give us that 2-minute synopsis, and then I think Sean's just going to go with it. We'll see where it goes and where I can interject. It'll be a show without John for a change.
John, you did a great job. My work here is through. I want to say thanks. You helped me out at Barber a couple of times, getting me in a good spot and things. I really appreciate that. And my career has been driving fast and racing cars. When I was 19 years old, I started out autocrossing, won 6 national championships. And then I went to road racing, running my own little team. And I started out in Firestone Firehawk Racing and Volkswagen Cup and IMSA Pro Stock and all these. I ran little cars. P.D. Cunningham calls them PP cars for many years. And then through some lucky breaks, Kevin Buckler got me my first ride in a GT Porsche. Alex Job Racing was a tremendous boost to my career. TPC Racing, these were all Porsches in the 2000s. We won the Rolex 24 in the GT class twice. And from then I got into World Challenge. And over the years, I'm most proud of my factory contracts. I had a factory driving contract with Porsche, then with Audi, then with Mazda, then with Volvo, and then with Mazda again. And I'm going to throw this out. There are a lot of guys who call themselves pro drivers because they've driven in a pro race. That, folks, is not a pro driver. A pro driver is someone who is paid to race, and even more specifically, makes the majority of their income from being paid to race cars. And these days, even pro drivers, even the top guys, are as much sponsorship salesmen as they are drivers. And that it's always been true, but it grew more during my career from the 90s, 2000s. So all this racing turned into, later in my driving career, when the pro driving slowed down, I had built a relationship with Motor Trend magazine that has been fantastic. I'm their track tester. I write road tests and articles for them, and I do a lot of video. And video And all that Motor Trend testing has actually made me way more famous than road racing ever did. And it's great. I mean, I run into people that know me everywhere. The kid at my favorite Chinese restaurant, pilot when I'm walking off the airplane, auto parts stores, very common. Anybody who watch it, typically I know they watch Motor Trend videos or they're on video a lot, and then they see me, and I do all these hot laps. And I even got hired by Porsche to do a hot lap in the GT2 RS last fall. And I do a lot of independent consulting for different manufacturers, mostly on handling and chassis dynamics. I'm in the unique position of having driven at track speed an incredible number and variety of cars. But really, I'm a bike guy. That I've always been passionate about motorcycles since I was on a mini bike at 12 years old. Wow. So that goes, you know, cars, bikes, wheels, engines, corners. I like the corners. That's my career.
Really similar, actually, scary background between you and I. I started riding bikes when I was 4.
Wow.
Yeah, I had an Indian 50 when I was 4 years old. And
I know that bike.
It was a cool little bike, man. I'd like to have one of those hanging on my wall right now.
Do it.
Had a little Indian 50 and just started with motocross, got into karts, autocross, still autocross. Won some national events. Never won a national championship, but I've never had a chance to get to a national championship. I've only done one national championship event, and we did something really stupid. We showed up. I'd been running V710s all year long on the Mini. I had a H-stock Mini Cooper, and been running V710s and loved the side slip that they gave for that car. Like, it didn't kill momentum. You could literally you could wheel the thing through a corner and it would side slip enough without bogging the car. And we showed up in Nebraska on Hoosiers. And literally, like, the first time I turned in, I went like this, and the car just nosed over, and it brought it just turn in. It was a level of grip that I was like, what? I was not ready for it. But that, and then road racing, and I instructed for PSDS for several years. And
wait, what's PFDS?
Porsche Sport Driving School.
Oh,
based
okay.
in Barber. Yeah. And went to SRT, and it's just a very similar background, man. It's so cool to have you, because I have followed where you came from. You know, I followed you through autocross. I was autocrossing when you were autocrossing, and you know, the showroom stock championships that you've won.
You don't look old enough, John.
I'll be 50 in August.
Young man.
I'll be 50 in August. I feel like I'm getting up there. But yeah, I started autocrossing in '86, so it's not 2 days ago. And you ran. Did you run GTI Cup or was it the VW Cup?
It was Volkswagen Cup.
Okay.
In 1985, which was the first year for the VW Golf.
Okay.
So they had a killer deal. They would sell you a car really cheap. It was a no-title dollar car. And that was how I was able to start racing. The deal was so good, and it was doable. And I had all this autocross experience, and I wanted desperately to road race. And I had saved all my money for first 2 years out of college, working a little program on the road called the National Collegiate Driving Championships for Dodge.
Okay.
And that little nest egg started me racing, thanks to Volkswagen Cup and being able to run that same car over in IMSA Pro Stock at the same time. And that car is being restored right now by Sterling Auto Works in Denver.
That's cool.
Guy's famous for the Frobel. He's so young man, energetic. I love him. Very positive. Cool. He rings a bell at the Pikes Peak start line. Go, woo! Come on, everybody, get wound up. Let's go. He's crazy, but he's great.
Well, crazy's fine. Crazy's fine. And to restore, cars like that, you have to be a little bit crazy to be doing that.
Well, he's not going crazy. This is not a museum piece. No way.
No.
It could be.
Is he going to track it?
VW Golf.
Is he?
Track race this car.
Hell yes. do that, definitely. All cars should be raced. I don't care if it's a minivan; it should be raced. I do want to touch on your transition from autocross to road racing, because we have so many people who they're either on like one side or they're in one camp or the other. And we don't see a ton of crossover, but then there are folks like you, Peter, oh God, what was it, Peter Cunningham?
Peter Cunningham, yeah.
He was a hell of an autocrosser.
He was.
Recently we can go with Tom O'Gorman.
Yep.
Tomo has won everything, and the young man, everything that Tom gets in, I don't understand. He's an alien. He's not from this world.
Yes.
But it's what I've seen over the years is it seems like very proficient autocrossers can make the transition from autocross to road racing in a very meaningful way, and do tend to do.
Sean locked up there. I'm not sure what's happening.
Yeah, but I can pick it right up from there until Sean comes back. And that the difference between autocross and road racing comes down to one fundamental: risk. In autocross, normally, the vast majority of the time, you're not putting your car or even yourself at risk. In road racing, you are. And a lot of people are not comfortable with that. And that's part of the reason why a lot of really great autocrossers choose to never go road racing. The risk to your car and the cost, and you run so much longer, you wear everything out much faster. And there are some people that just choose not to do that. Me, having grown up in autocross, I have great respect for that sport. That is pure driving. And in road racing, they always look down on it, right? But also because if they ever try it, they're terrible at it. Road racers make terrible autocrossers.
Well, I want to say when I first got to Barber's and I was there and I was hanging out with a lot of the Porsche Club people and their track days and times that they arrived, and a lot of their instructors supported, or at that time, I'm not sure how our local PCA is now, supported autocross, and that you should autocross for a little bit of time. And it's learning car control, and that translates to the track. And yeah, I can see, you can autocross for, $800, $1,000 a year and probably still afford to go out to eat on that budget. Where when you jump into the track, you're worried about somebody coming along and taking you out. And then, if you have too nice of a car or too good of a car, you worry about some guy in some ratty old thing who doesn't know what he's doing taking you out. So I understand the budget thing, but I've always been a believer in that you should start autocrossing. I think a lot of the teen drivers, at 16, 17, and 18 should go do a couple autocrosses, even if they don't enjoy racing. And it's not teaching them to race, it's teaching them the car control. And that's what I always got out of autocross. I only did it for a short period of time, really didn't do a lot because, again, I like to win and I don't make enough money to win. I've said that many times on this. So, but yeah, I kind of agree with you that, the road racers are afraid to go back because the car control is required so much in autocross, and autocross, I think, is required to really go effectively be a road racer, as you've kind of proven.
I'm sorry I dropped out on you guys.
Oh yeah, you back, Sean?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know what happened. I'll blame Spectrum for that. I think your answer was probably in line with where I'm thinking, but I think you said something along the lines of autocross equals car control, and road racing, obviously you need the car control, but it doesn't necessarily translate backwards. Is that kind of
about the risk, Sean?
Okay.
That's a big difference. In
huge.
Autocross, you're probably not going to ever destroy your car. In road racing, every time you leave pit lane, you got to be willing to accept that thing might not come back.
Right.
And be able to afford it. And what's interesting in comparison to the two, autocross, even though you're driving, your speed on the speedometer is much, much slower. Your inputs are much, much faster. It's much more aggressive.
Things happen in the car so much faster.
Left, right. And road racers used to right. And a road racer's just not ready for that kind of intensity.
Yeah, it's a handling and driving thing versus a racecraft thing. And, you know, that's one thing over the years. And I used to write seat instruct for various organizations. I did it for a long time, and trying to get someone coming from the autocross world, getting out on track for the first time, getting into that traffic situation for the first time, and trying to just keep them calm enough to start understanding the situational awareness needed to know where things are coming up from the left and the right. And racecraft is just a whole other thing. You know, it's pretty amazing to watch someone develop that, though, and being a part of watching people develop that is just an epic experience. How much coaching have you done over the years, or have you been pretty much, I'm racing the car, man?
I have been by far a racing driver.
Okay.
I actually don't consider myself that great a coach. I do have some advantages in that I know a lot. Two, I have this bad tendency to get a little frustrated with my clients if they're doing things that seem perfectly obvious to me.
Right.
And I've got, you know, when you're going to coach, you got to take yourself back and see it through the eyes of somebody doing it for the first time.
Yeah.
But I'm passionate about it. And all last year I was coaching a young woman, Sarah Edge, and that's a whole nother story. But she actually died in a car crash on the street not long ago. Tragic. But until that point, such a wonderful experience with that young woman. And I was tough with her when it was important, right? And that oftentimes was if she would make the same mistake 2 or maybe 3 times, same mistake, and it was important, I'd go, Pitt.
Right.
And she would, but I'm like, Pitt, we got to talk about this. And she hated that because she hated losing the track time. This young lady was passionate about driving, but some things are important, and I really nail that. But also as a coach, I'm very, very fundamental. I'm a basics, fundamental guy. No magic, no formulas, no, just where are you looking?
Get your eyes up.
Right.
look where you want the car.
Look where you want to go.
Absolutely.
And also, I'm all about not so much trail braking as a slow brake release and a gentle initial throttle application. And when I was riding with Sarah, she learned that so well, and it made her fast way beyond her experience because she learned that so well. And we'd come into a corner, she'd roll off that brake, turn the car, and hit that throttle so lightly, I couldn't feel it. That's the secret of a good driver.
Yeah.
When they applied the throttle, if there's a passenger, they couldn't feel it. And then roll it on. What? The old Jackie Stewart line, the throttle should only go more.
Right.
Once you get on it, it should only go either stop or more. It should never go on and off. And I don't care how Ayrton Senna drove the NSX in that video 25 years ago.
Just because he drove it and just because it was fast doesn't make it right. Like I have some friends who they're fast. They're incredibly fast, but they light switch the throttle. They go to 50% more brake pressure than they need. And, you know, in the initial application of braking zones, they're just swatting flies. They're fast, but they're not right.
For how long?
Yeah. Right. Well,
there's a big difference between being able to be fast and being able or turn a quick lap and to be able to win the race or be fast for a long time, right?
Right.
A lot of guys can turn a fast lap and they're driving like you described.
Also, and their tires are gone immediately.
Tires?
Right.
Yeah. One of the primary jobs of a race driver is taking care of his tires because you win the race. Do you win the race on the start, on the first lap?
It depends on what series you're in, and you know, and I'm just kidding.
You win the race when the checkered comes out on the last lap, and the guy that wins is the guy that kept tires under the car and is still strong on those last 2 or 3 laps.
Going back to instruction real quick, and I know you said you haven't done a ton of it, but you have done some of it. And the young lady
I have over 30 years. I have done a lot.
Right. Do you find it? I have my own opinion on this. Do you find it easier to coach men or women?
Oh, women.
There you go. There you go.
Men can be very difficult, especially wealthy, successful entrepreneurs, because they have been making good decisions their whole life. They got this. And
that's exactly what I say all the time.
Guess what? They also don't want to hear that they're already good, even though they hired you at great expense to coach them.
Right.
This is a great generalization, but it is so true sometimes. And I don't want to coach in that situation either.
Well, we all know if you spend $250,000 on a GT3 RS or a GT2 RS, it comes with that racing now.
Yeah, you bought talent at that point. Yeah, you actually can purchase the talent. No.
Hey, man, in today's world, that's kind of true, right?
If you leave all the driving aids on, sure. I mean, Porsche stability management and just some of the other TC systems that are out there. We have a friend who has a 720S. That car with driving aids on is it's stuck to the earth by the hand of God. It's actually right before the interview, I was watching your ignition episode with the 720. Oh my God, that car.
Remember what I said? Or specifically, here's what I said. The McLarens are highly electronically controlled cars.
Yes.
From the MP412C, which I really didn't like in that way, highly electronically controlled. I got out of that car and I asked the McLaren representative, I said, is everything off? And he said, yeah, it's off as it can be.
Right.
I said, because I don't feel like I'm the guy driving half the time.
Yeah.
But the 720S, the stability controls have gotten steadily better at McLaren, better and better.
You can rotate the hell out of that car.
Yeah. And we turned everything off, or we tried to turn everything off, all the stability controls, drove the car, my favorite McLaren, loved it in many ways. And yet, I think stability control was working, and I just couldn't even tell.
PASM has gotten like that too. PASM on the Porsches is the same way. Like I am blown away by, not necessarily even supercar level, because I don't consider a 911S. That's not a supercar in my opinion. It performs like one, but it's still not quite in that rarefied air. But the stability management system is so good that you can actually leave it on and get as much lap time out of it as you turned them off. Or do you find that? Because I've driven a lot of cars. I've been very fortunate. You have been more fortunate than I have. Do you find the same, that you can actually leave it on and it doesn't really get in your way as long as you're doing everything correctly? If you're being smooth on the controls and rolling into the throttle, like you were saying, smoothly, and not moving weight front to back in the car erratically, it just doesn't seem to get in the way on a lot of cars nowadays.
That is a great question, Sean. And it's one that I've dealt with many times, because I only get a few laps to do these hot laps.
Right.
I don't get to practice much. Most times I get zero. I get in the car, go out on the out lap, and here's what it comes down to. In 99% of the cars, 97% of the cars, I'm faster with stability controls off, all the way off. And that's changing a little bit because they're getting better every year.
There you go.
And two, when a car is really bad handling, I'm faster with it on. Good example, I'm going to pick on a car, Corvette C7 Z06. Very difficult car to drive fast with the stability controls off, primarily because it does not put power down very well at all in second and third gear, and it has a lot of power. So when you tip in that throttle, it's very easy to get a snap oversteer.
Right.
And it makes it very difficult to turn a good lap in the car without a whole lot of practice. It's very spinnable. In fact, I don't know if Andy Pilgrim is still working for Chevy. He probably is. Andy is a great guy. He's so hooked up. And when I first drove the C7 Z06, which would have been 2012, 11, when did that come out?
It's got to be, yeah. It's that
something like that.
Yeah.
Andy was there. I was there as a journalist, And Andy and I were actually racing in World Challenge against each other. He was with Cadillac, and I was in that car behind you, the Capex Volvo. And Andy says, yeah, the car's great. Leave the stability control on the full race setting. That'll be best for you. And I'm going, wow, Andy Pilgrim leaves the stability control on. It's in the least invasive setting. But in 2012, that was still pretty darn invasive.
Yeah.
And it was because it was so much easier to get that power down in second and third gear in the slow corners. And the C7 stayed that way its whole life. And this is kind of a whole new subject, but I'm going to step into the C8. The C8 is the opposite. The C8 puts down power like nobody's business in second and third gear. It's just really, really good at that.
All that weight moved to the back. It has no choice. I mean,
and they're making it work.
How's the balance? Like I've sat in a couple. I haven't had a chance to drive one properly yet. Do you love it?
I've driven the Z51
yeah.
A fair amount. This is the newest Corvette that just came out. I guess it's a 2020 model, right, Sean?
Yeah.
And the world has been waiting for this car. I don't think I've driven a non-Z51 actually, but it's not complete. But it's a far superior car to the C7, both in terms of quality from the minute you open the door and get in the car.
Definitely.
And the way it puts the power down so well at low revs. I'm all about power down. That's a very, very important part of a car's performance.
If you can't use the power, why have more?
Yeah. But the characteristics of the Corvette, the new Corvette C8 showed me, one, it has drop throttle oversteer. This is with everything off. I turn everything off. When I enter a corner hard, off throttle, and I do that slow brake release, which is almost like a little bit of a trail brake.
Mm-hmm.
Pow, sideways.
Really?
Definitely. Yes.
Even with the 50-50, even with the weight balance. Wow.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It has entry oversteer, snap entry oversteer. Then you go to a little bit of power, instantly the rear hooks up, if you're not too sideways, but the rear hooks up, and in steady state, it understeers strongly. Strong understeer, steady state, mid corner in a slower corner. And the reason, what I think is going on there is, I believe that the Chevy team is trying to fix this entry oversteer with the springs and sway bars, but they don't come into effect until later in the corner.
Yeah.
And I encourage the chief engineer, whose name escapes me, who was forced to ride with me, by the way, on my hot laps. That was Chevy's rule. I said, I don't want your job, buddy. But anyway, he was riding with me. And I said, use the E-diff. They have this amazing E-diff that can be programmed. And so you could use a trick that Porsche figured out many, many years ago to tame that rear engine. Hook up the differential real strong in the entry zone. That's why Porsche differentials have ramps, off throttle or on throttle. Okay. Off throttle, a Porsche differential hooks up strong, and that helps keep that tail from coming out, because the rear wheels don't want to turn when they're hooked up. It's like driving a car with a locker.
Yeah.
But when the car already wants to turn, like a rear engine or a mid-engine, you can use this to make it controllable. And when I told the Chevy engineer the car had entry oversteer, turn-in entry oversteer, off throttle, he looked at me quizzically and thought for a moment. He goes, Randy, I have never heard that from one of our test drivers. And I said,
they're not driving them hard enough.
That's because your test drivers are driving the same car every day for hours, and they're driving around it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same thing that happened to the C7. These guys got good at that snap oversteer, or they would leave the stability on. So the answer is the Corvette has tremendous potential yet to be realized, and it's off to a great start. The C8 is a far better car than a C7.
It's beautiful. It's gorgeous, number one. And then, I mean, with the base car, 0 to 60 in 2.8 and the base car, I don't need a Z06. Like, here's something that we'd love to get your opinion on, and I know John wants your opinion on this too. Is the C8 going to do what all other Corvettes have done since the C4 in 3 or 4 years, are we going to be able to pick up a C8, in effect, a mass-produced pseudo supercar? Are we going to be able to pick up one for 40 grand in 2 or 3 years? It's a mass-produced car, right?
Probably.
Like, they're going to build all of them. They're going to build as many as they can.
Probably, but what's different is the quality is so high on the C8 and the price is so low. It seems like such a great value.
Don't talk it up, Randy. I want one.
I know.
I don't think they'll depreciate until the Z06 gets here in 21 and the ZR1 in 22 or 23. But what they've done is you've talked some about this, and I know, the 2020 production's over. They're retooling for 2021 when everybody can go back to work. And MagRide has become is now standard on the car as opposed to being an option. And will that MagRide help with what you're addressing, or is that kind of just a sales thing? And I also wanted to go back. We had Andy Pilgrim on episode 65, and he's still with GM, still doing a lot of Corvette testing and things. So just to update you on where he was and to plug a previous episode with another pretty decent driver. So
Andy is a great guy. He does everything right. He's such a gentleman, and I have the greatest respect for him.
He does that really big into that teen driving safety, and that's part of Derek and I on this show, a big thing.
And no texting.
Yep.
No, he does lectures on it for years.
It's not a bad place to be. That's a good message to get out there. It drives me crazy.
That's what I mean about Andy. He does everything right.
Right.
He does stuff like that. I can't even get the garbage taken out. And you've got this whole program going, and you have a company, and you're a pro racer. I don't know. He's one of those guys. He's a supercar of humans.
I think you're doing okay, Randy. I think you're doing okay. You've kind of figured it out. You're doing all right.
Now that Andy's on the table, let me tell you about how he raced. Andy was a thinking racer. And what impressed me was the way he would pass cars late in a race. He took care of his car. He followed that theory that I was just talking about, where you win the race at the end, not at the beginning. And he could identify a place and then surprise me and others with it. You think you'd had him, but he knew. He said, in turn 3, I can brake better that guy. I'm not going to give him any clue. Pull out, boom, and you're dead. He's got you. Took you clean through, and it's like, wow, nice job, Andy. Even though you just beat me bad, nice job. I saw him do that again and again to me and others.
That's the mark of a really great driver.
Thinking driver, yeah.
Yeah, being able to set that pass up 10 laps in advance and know when you're going to have the tires, and whoever you're trying to set up doesn't have the tire anymore, or just is getting fatigued or whatever. It's amazing to watch folks that can get out there, especially in endurance racing. You're out there for 2.5, 3.5 hours a stint. And at the end of that stint, to still have the presence of mind to be able to do that is fairly epic. I mean, it's more than fairly epic. It is.
For me, so much respect.
Yeah, tons.
I'm seeing a lot of passes these days as a result of just punting the guy ahead of you out of the way. And that just ruins the entire sport for me.
All right, I'm going to throw this question out. This is across all genres of automobile. I don't care whether it's a race car or a street car or whatever. Typically, those of us that have had the privilege to drive many, many cars, we have one that stands out, and we kind of compare everything else that we drive to this one vehicle. Do you have one, or do you have a handful that you could bring up and the reasons why they stand out for you?
Wow, that is so hard, Sean.
I know. It's
but
the one.
Some come up for me.
Okay.
Get this. One of the best handling cars I ever drove. So perfectly intuitive, so easy to control, and absolutely flat out was an E30 M3 with Turner suspension, Turner Motorsport suspension on all season tires. It was unbelievable. And then in terms of race cars, I loved the 993 RSR in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I drove with Alex Job Racing when I first got opportunities in GT racing. The 993 was such a sweetheart, and it had ABS. I actually like ABS because it's easier. You're really more of a driver if you're good without ABS. And another car that has impressed me tremendously, even though I don't consider myself a Porsche-phile, is the GT2 RS.
Okay.
I was hired by Porsche to do that hot lap like I bragged about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already driven it in Motor Trend's best driver's car. So on track, we felt that car was too stiff. But not on track, I'm sorry, on the road. And that's the only reason it didn't make best driver's car. Because when I drove it on track, I couldn't believe how good it was.
Magic.
How it handled the way Porsches should handle. And I got a real soapbox here that I have for many, I've raced a lot of Porsches since the late 90s. And I always felt like the closer you got to Porsche Motorsport, the worse the cars handled. That the best handling Porsches were the plain old stock ones. And until this current model of RS. And I have become very good friends with a Porsche PR guy by the name of Frank Wiesman. And Frank works in the Atlanta office, and he's at every Motor Trend car test, and Porsche is a big supporter of that. And Frank had told me, he said, you know what, you're going to like this RS. And I said, really? I don't know. They've always been kind of twitchy for me. And here's my theory for what's going on there. When you get over to motorsport, who are their test drivers? Well, it's the race car drivers.
Yeah.
It's these fantastic, incredibly talented drivers, often young, except for the guys that have been there a while, who started out karting for 8 or 10 years. And go-karts have a solid axle. And I heard you say you karted, Sean.
I did a little bit. Yeah.
You'll understand this. They have a solid axle. If you drive them smooth with a nice trail brake, they just go straight, right?
Yeah, you twitch them in and you lift the inside rear. Yeah.
You got to twitch them in, get that rear end out, slide them a little bit, get the inside tire unloaded. Well, you grow up doing that. You're an incredibly talented driver. You go over to drive a Porsche. Well, how are you going to want it to handle? The same way. And that's how they are. They're twitchy.
I'm the weird guy. I'm slow in, fast out, man. And I've always been that guy. I hope I'm better than average because people, that's all I aspire to be. Well, I aspire to be more than that, but still. It's cool to hear your perspective on it. And the one car that I always go back to is also a Porsche, and I'd like your feelings on this too. I literally, when I was at the sport driving school, I mind melded with the Cayman R. That car to me, it's not a spectacularly, it's 330 horsepower. It's not crazy powerful, but it's perfect for that car. It's the right amount of power for that car. And I would rather have a chassis and motor balanced to each other than just, I've got 2,700 horsepower. I can't put any of the power down, but it goes back to the old, was it Donahue that said, if I can't spin the tires coming off the corner all the way to the next corner, then I don't have enough power. I've never been able to do that.
The older Donahue,
Yeah. I've never been that guy. I want balance. You strike me as the balance guy.
Oh yeah. Well, I grew up driving little cars,
showroom stock,
100 horsepower cars, and still balance is just critical story for me. If a car is balanced, I believe that a good handling car practically drives itself. And I really don't believe in slow in. I believe in fast in.
Well,
slow when you're aimed at the apex. It feels calm in the middle.
Right. That's what I meant. I mean, don't overdrive the car.
Yeah,
Just don't
calm in the middle, because that's such an important time when you're going from completely cornering to beginning to accelerate. Calm in the middle, then roll the power in gently at the very first, and then as the weight transfers back all the way down to full, and you come out of there, you know, it feels slow in the middle, but by the time you get to the exit, you are moving.
Yeah.
And when Sarah Edge would do that, I swear to God, it brought tears to my eyes because she got so good at it. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Oh.
That feeling you get when you're in the right seat with someone that gets it right, and you know that you at least played some small part of that, is damn near as good as when you get it right. Like did you get that reward? I mean, it sounds like you got that reward from anyone that you've ever coached. It feels so good seeing them get better.
But inside, I was glowing like a proud papa.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was proud of her too, because she did it.
Right.
But to see her doing that, or any client, any driver that I'm coaching, to see them learn that feeling of getting on the throttle like a butterfly landing on a leaf at first, gentle, and roll it on. That's how the GT2 RS is. I didn't have to do anything special. I could just turn the wheel, and it did the right thing the whole time.
I need to find one. You're talking it up to the point where I'm like, I need to drive that car.
You need to drive one, because I know the Cayman R, and it's so beautifully balanced and such a well-behaved car. All those Caymans are up until the GT4 and the GT4 Club Sport, because when you lower them a lot, they get ugly.
Yeah.
People, don't lower your Caymans super low to the ground. It screws up the rear toe curve. But when they're at stock ride height, hell, Sean, I love the 2007 Cayman S.
Yeah.
The plain old stock Cayman.
Yeah.
Although, guess what? If you try to track that, the oiling doesn't work, and a lot of bad things can happen.
Yeah, and a lot of people. If you get that's one thing that I've found is that with the mid-engine Porsche, it has so much grip that most people will never explore the car's true 10/10ths. Like most people will never get it up there. But if you have the ability to get the car to its 10/10ths, that thing gets wicked on the edge. Like when they snap, it's true with a lot of mid-engine cars. When they go, they spin in their own axis, man. There's no wagging the tail. It's just gone.
McLarens are like that.
Are they really?
With the stability off. Except for the 720, it got better.
Okay. Because I'm actually going to get to take that 720 out on Barber here. And once we go back to the norm, I cannot wait, man. I
love them. They're just so powerful. You got to be, especially at Barber with all those slow corners, you got to wield the great power with great responsibility.
with great power comes a very controlled right foot.
Yeah, that's a Spider-Man quote, I think.
Yeah.
But they're so powerful that you can screw yourself up. You got to be really, well, I'm sure you will be.
I'm going to try. I'm honestly, I'm going to go out and I'm going to drive the car at 7/10, and I'm going to bring the $400,000 car home unscathed. That's what I'm going to do.
Won't hurt it.
I'm not going to hurt it. I'm definitely not going to hurt it. I love the guy that owns it. I'm not going to tear up Phil's car.
You won't.
It's
20 has better brakes too, better brake response. The early McLarens did not have good response or a good pedal feel. And I didn't like the way I'd be ripping down the straightaway in like a 675 LT or the MP412C, ripping down the straight going, I wonder where I should brake, because I don't feel real confident about how and when. Whereas the 720, the brakes started to make sense again.
Right.
So it started to feel a little bit more like the world standard of brakes. Tell me.
Porsche. Yeah, it's Porsche. There's no doubt.
Great brakes. The C7, as good or better as anybody in the business. They had fantastic brakes.
Did you ever drive a Mark IV R32?
Sorry?
Did you ever get to drive Mark IV R32 in anger?
Yeah. Yeah.
That car, I had one. That car, I tried to make the factory brakes would not die on that car. Like it was, it was 60-0, and like back in 2004, it was 60-0 and like 113 feet or something like that. That was unheard of on a car. Yeah, it was. Right? Yeah, it was the R32. The 3.2 liter VR. That it was underpowered. But my God, what an amazing braking system that car had. But
John,
Porsche
I didn't like about most of those VWs from that era is the stability control wouldn't go all the way off.
I didn't like that, and the hall decks back then was terrible.
Yeah, I don't like hall decks. I'm sorry, but
terrible.
I had a Volvo V70R wagon back when I was
racing. Cool car.
Behind you.
Yeah, it's a cool car.
Great car, but it had hall decks.
Yeah.
And what a hall decks does is it's a front drive until you start to slip, and then it attaches rear drive.
But it never sends it where you want it.
Rear drive until it starts to slip, and then attach the fronts. And so the hall decks is old school.
Yeah, the R32, when you would turn in, like if it was a too tight of a corner with the drive-by-wire that VW had back then, it wasn't sensitive. You couldn't modulate throttle all that well. And you'd turn in and you'd get the car balanced, and then you'd try to go back to power, and it would put the inside front into orbit and wouldn't transfer power anywhere. And then you'd let off to try to get the thing to come back to you. And when you'd let off, the throttle hang that they had programmed into it would just hold the RPMs up forever. So you literally it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And I remember sitting down with a VW engineer.
Wheel spin?
Oh God, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. I have to ask this question, and this will get John re-engaged in the conversation probably.
I told you I was going to be quiet through most of this.
Let's switch it over to road cars real quick. I believe I remember this correctly. You ran for champion for a couple years, correct?
I had that great honor, yes.
And did they or did they not give you an S4 Avant, a black S4 Avant?
It was not an S4. It was a 4-cylinder turbo.
But it was a black Avant.
It was black Avant.
The champion wheels and
yes, champion wheels. Had somebody's exhaust on it. Borla maybe.
I drooled on your car.
Oh, I love that.
that car made every time I walked by, I was like, "That's Randy's car." Oh,
yeah,
it was beautiful.
They only gave it to me for a year, but
right?
Guess what? I drove for Audi in 2004 also, and they said, "Hey, what car do you want?" And I'm going, "I want to keep this one. Thank you."
Don't take it
no,
back.
You can't. I'm going, "What? What do you mean I can't?" Well, now you've got the upgrade, the factory contract's been upgraded. We won the championship in 2003, and you have to have a new car. And I went, oh, man.
But I'm happy with this one. Don't take it. You just bought it. Did they let you, would they have let you buy it from them? Or were they just...
Yeah, but buy it. What are you, crazy? I get a new car?
Yeah, okay.
Just for a year. I didn't get to keep it.
Right.
But I got another Avant Sport, but I went with the V6, and the V6 was more luxurious. It was a lot heavier on the nose. It was smooth. It was mellow. I like the 4-cylinder turbo a lot better. Much lighter on the nose. They had a little chippy chip in it, so it had pretty good torque. And I would love to have cranked that up another 100 horse, which would have been really easy with an upgrade to a TD04 turbo, and wouldn't have taken much.
Yeah, now it's like the IS38 upgrade for the 2-liter VWs and Audis. You can get crazy power out of those cars nowadays. Sticking with street car theme, and this is where I was hoping to get John re-engaged. What is the favorite car that you've ever owned as a daily driver? And what does Randy Pobst have in his garage right now?
Oh, well, yeah, well, my garage right now is easy. I have a lot of cars, but I just bought a new car. Ever since I drove for Mazda, I like to have a car I'm driving when I drive for a factory. And I could not talk Mazda into giving me a car to drive. So I bought a Miata. I was racing a Miata with Freedom Autosport. Mm-hmm. And I sold that a year later. I loved that car, except I couldn't use it as an airport car because I couldn't get my 2 bags in it.
Right.
And so for literally 6 years, I was looking for a really nice daily driver until I finally committed. Because I'm cheap, I want a good deal. I've traveled all the time. You know what I ended up with? I bought a Camaro 1LE 4-cylinder.
That's a great car.
It's
that little turbo is cool, man.
It's like my old Audi. It's so light on the nose for a Camaro.
Yeah.
This thing weighs 3,350. Guess what? The ZL1 1LE 650 horsepower car, that thing's like 3,850, 39.
Yeah.
We're talking 500 pounds.
Yeah.
And if I had one of those, I'd be in jail or the hospital or dead.
We used to give me grief when I was with SRT. They were developing the Challenger. They had the Challenger GT that you could get the Scat Pack suspension and 4-pot Brembos on. And that was like 2 years ago that car came out. I was up at the Proving Grounds up in outside of Detroit, Chelsea. And all the SRT guys were out there, and we had all the Trackhawks and ACRs and just all the hot stuff was out there. And I kept hot lapping a 500 Abarth, the 124 Abarth, and the Challenger GT with the Scat Pack stuff under it. And it was like Eric, Eric Hoisley?
Oh yeah, I know him well.
Eric hopped in the car with me, and he's like, "What do I need to do to get you in the Trackhawk for a couple laps?" So I was like, "I'll go drive it, but I'm going to come back and drive the Challenger." And he's like, "Why do you like it so much?" I was like, "Because it turns. It actually turns when I want it to. It's amazing when that happens. It's cool to hear that you like the nimble. You like the nimble side of things.
Yeah, and it has enough power for the street without going crazy. I can tack it out, and I'm doing 67, not 90.
Right.
And literally, part of the reason I chose it was I really felt like I'd just get myself in trouble drifting a Camaro SS around a corner. I would.
Well, that goes back to your history of the small, light, nimble cars, the little sports cars you started out with. It goes back into the conversation. I think about a week ago, I put up the meme as a memory off my personal page up to the podcast page. If you can't go fast with 90 horsepower, 900 horsepower is worthless. And it goes back to the Jay Leno statement about, or like, I guess Jay Leno said it, but I won't credit it to him, that it's more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow. And when you're on the street, you don't need, 600, 800 horsepower. It's kind of a waste, except stoplight to stoplight. And eventually you get tired of that, or you get tired of buying tires, one or the other. So
and fuel.
I think, I'm totally with you. I like the small and nimble and, little type fun cars. I'm a huge CRX SI guy. I don't know if you,
yeah.
And, I've had my Miatas in my lifetime. And of course I'm a Lotus guy with Caterham, and you're talking the mid-engine stuff. I can't tell you how many times I loop my Europa. It's, I've just liked that small, little, light, fast stuff. And I've watched Sean over the years and met him when he was driving a Mini, and he's went to the Fiats. And 2 years ago, if he was running that Scat Pack, I think he had his Scat Pack also. So, I mean, he's been into the big, heavy Challengers too. He runs everything, and
I have an Alpha. It's a sickness, right? I mean, it's literally like, once you get a little bit of the car, it doesn't even necessarily have to be car. It's vehicular. There's something about tires and engines. I don't care whether it's 2 wheels, 4 wheels. I don't care whether it's front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, all wheel drive. I don't care if it's 90 horsepower or 900. Just give me the keys. And you strike me as the same. It's literally like, it seems like you're happy with whatever it is that you get to drive, as long as you get to drive. Am I right in that assumption?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to John.
Oh, hell no. I'm talking to you. I can talk to John anytime. I don't get to talk to you all that.
I'm not happy with everything. Things that piss me off. One, stability controls that intervene, and I can't turn them off and get rid of them. And I know it. I feel it. That pisses me off. Another thing, I don't like snap entry oversteer.
How about Miatas that bump steer?
Cars. And I've driven long enough. I know you don't need to be that way to be fast. In fact, if you are that way, I will beat you because you're going to put too much heat and wear on your back tires. And I will wear you out. I'm a slow hands. When the car's right, the hands are slow. And some cars rotate in a beautiful way. And I love to do that drifty thing. But this, no, that makes me angry. But yeah, okay, I still love it. But
is that why you got out of the TA 2.0 Viper and berated it the way you did? I think it was Laguna Seca. You got out of that car and went on a tirade, man. I was like, ooh.
Trying to kill you. Even going straight, when you shift gears, that car rotates.
You fixed it. They did fix it.
They totally fixed it.
Yeah.
You're talking about the ACR Viper, the last one.
Yeah.
Especially the
ACR. No, there was an orange TA 2.0 that I think you drove at Laguna.
Yes.
That the interview after that was like, what'd you think, Randy? Well, I don't want to die, so don't put me down. It was something along, I'm paraphrasing, but it was close to that. And then they came back with a bunch of suspension changes and maybe some better tires on it. You had some better things to say about it, but
the one before the TA was worse.
Really?
And yeah, I got into a Twitter war with, who's that great? Ralph Gilles.
Yeah.
The designer, and he is or was a big cheese at Chrysler, and he's one of the greatest people that ever lived.
I love Ralph.
Love the guy. But he came into that Viper well after it was established, and they just called it the car's personality. Oh, that's how it is. You got to drive this car. Roar. And I said, no, it just handles bad. And I like to think that I had some little bit of help in telling the Emperor that he had no clothes on.
I think you did. Matter of fact, I don't think you did. I know you did.
Really? I feel good about that.
I know
don't
you
want
did.
to insult anybody, but the truth is the truth. And sometimes you got to hear it. And the TA was a step in that direction. It was a little better. But then the Viper ACR X, I don't know if you ever even drove a normal ACR, was fantastic. Yeah. Still is.
Yeah.
I could drive it with one hand. It was unbelievable.
It's daily drivable too. And you can't say that about any other Viper.
Talk about a car that would bring tears to my eyes because it improved so much.
Right.
Like Helen Keller, when she was blind and couldn't see and couldn't talk, and she understood the water. She said, wait a minute. You're telling me that this stuff I feel is water. I get it. That's how I felt when I drove the ACR Viper. I said, you guys, you fixed it. And it's what? It's canceled? Don't cancel it. You fixed it.
Yeah, it happens way too often, man.
Get it right, and then you kill it. Last model year.
Yeah, you get it right, and then you exit.
And we've had a Viper in our family since '94, so first generation car.
Wow!
And I've always said, and since '94, and it's exactly what you said is part of the appeal to Viper and Viper ownership is knowing the two rules about a Viper. One, the car's designed to kill you, and your purpose in life is to stay alive. And every trip you keep rule number 2 intact, you've done well. And even when I get into it on the Radwood pages and we're talking about one gen or kind of that 95 to 98 Viper or so where they softened it a little bit, put door handles on it and glass in it, those trivial things in the 90s. That's one of the prides of ownership is it'll scare you, and it takes a little bit of finesse or just insanity to drive it. And of course, one of the things I criticize over Viper is exactly what you're commending them for, is they got softer and softer over the years. And by the time they have went away for this generation, I'm sure they'll be back. They were a lot like driving a Corvette. They were very Corvette-ish and a little bit softer. So
the Gen 1 through 4 wanted to kill you. The Gen 5, up until they did make the changes, was a little too raw. But now I swear that the Gen 5 to me is daily drivable. you could literally live with that car on a daily basis. You can't get anything in it, unfortunately. You can't take it shopping or anything like that.
The
But
golf club's not going to work.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. But like the Gen 5, once they got the calibration stuff sorted, it's very tame until you ask it to be rude, and then it gets rude. And there's something. What do you think? The first time you heard the Gen 5 exhaust note, did that not make the hair stand up all over your? Like, it's that trumpet sound that 8.4 makes, man. It's visceral and happiness and everything that I ever wanted a car to sound like.
And it's best in the car.
Yeah.
Because you can hear pipes.
Yeah. Yeah, it just makes an amazing noise.
8.4 liters. Can you imagine?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes, I can. I got to actually tear one of those motors down at Prefix, and just going through. I'm mechanical. Like I'm not a mechanic at all, but I appreciate the mechanical side of all that stuff, and just getting to see the cam and cam tech and all that. It's pretty cool. I mean, for being a pushrod motor,
yeah,
it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Aluminum, right?
Yeah.
The early ones had an iron block.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. They were really heavy.
And the motor's like that long.
Yeah, they're as big as your room. There's a reason why the Viper has, an aircraft carrier front end on it. It needs a lot of room up there. I have one last question for you. I think we're probably pushing up on an hour, aren't we, John?
I was going to say, we just hit an hour and we hadn't touched on any of Randy's two-wheel stuff. I don't know how much time he's got for us. If he wants to give us,
we can always bring him back.
Yeah, we can bring him back, or if he wants to give us 15 more minutes and talk a little bit about his.
I love to talk motorcycles.
Yeah, well, we need to talk a little bit motorcycle, but I don't know what your schedule is, and I just, in this time of lockdown, I have to run to Target. So, but that's all I've got on my schedule for tonight. So I got at least until whatever, 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock.
Can you spare another hour at some point?
Minutes, maybe talk bikes a little bit. I would love to. Thank you.
Yeah, let's do that, because like I said in the very, very beginning, and that's how No Driving Gloves works, is we start with something and we end up finishing with it. Is that I met you through, personally through motorcycles and some of this stuff that you had, and Sean asked you what cars you had in your garage, and you kind of dodged it, and we talked about the Camaro. And I think a couple of years ago, when, like I said, the VinWiki thing, you talked about 3 or 4, maybe you had 5 cars at the time, but 15 motorcycles, and had a goal to get those down to 4 or 5. And maybe that's one of the reasons you were at the Vintage Festival. But first question is, were we successful in paring that down, or did one go away and rebirth 2 more or something like that?
Not successful in paring it down yet. I did sell 2 bikes, but then a guy calls me up, says he inherited a bike from his mom and my good friend Mark Francis. And I said, Mark, I got no room, no need for any more motorcycles. Thank you. Not interested. He says, yeah, but I'll give it to you. I went, what?
Okay.
Because it's a 1981 Honda CX 500, which is not a highly desirable motorcycle, but it's cool. And with each passing year, it's a V-twin, water-cooled, perfect, garage-kept condition, new. And I can't say no. And besides, the minivan was only $25 one way from Columbus, Ohio from Cincinnati to Atlanta. So anyway, yeah, I failed on that, John. Plus, I just bought a bike about a month ago. I bought a KTM 690 Duke.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is, again, like the cars, light, agile, quick, like a part of you. I'm not a huge fan of big, heavy motorcycles. And I have very few motorcycles that have any more than 100 horsepower because most of them are far less, because most of them are old. But my very favorite bike is a Honda CBX done as a cafe racer. And the CBX is a 6-cylinder. The motorcycle's outrageous, or the engine is outrageous. air-cooled six-cylinder that's wider than the gas tank is. You can see it sticking out both sides. Definitely had to have a 6-into-1 exhaust because the exhaust note is just mind-bending.
Yeah.
Between the intake and the exhaust. And, whoop-a.
What kind of RPM does it spin?
It's not that. This thing's a 1979. So the red line, I
9,000?
think, about 9 or 10 grand.
Yeah.
It's not that high.
And
It's not that low either. I mean, it's still 9 grand is awesome.
And when I was at Barber's, Mr. Barber came to the guy that had been with the restoration team and used to race and said, "Hey, what bike, if you could build your dream bike, what do you want?" And the gentleman said a CBX, and Mr. Barber basically gave him a CBX and said, "Your project is to make this your dream bike." And, on limited budget, but keeping it within budget. I think Mr. Barber is unlimited, and the director and the financial people were a little different, but he ended up building one heck of, and I would almost say it's in that cafe racer spirit of the CBX. And I'm not a huge bike guy, but that's when I began to learn about it and the reputation and, the legend that bike really is, it's a lot of cylinders and inline 6 in a motorcycle, or I guess that would be a transverse 6, wouldn't it? But,
yes. Is that bike in the museum? Where did that bike end up? I'd love to see it.
It's usually, unless they, it's really been a year since I've seen the collection. It used to be kept in the basement level, it's just outside of Chuck's office behind where the 918 Spider is on display. And I don't know if it's still there, but next time you're there, see if you can manipulate your way down, or give me a call and I'll call somebody and we'll get you to see that bike.
I will. Thanks, John. You're always so good to me. And I'm pretty good friends with Lee Clark.
Yes.
I bet Lee could set me up.
Yeah, Lee definitely could. Lee was my former supervisor there. And, so yeah, you could give him a call and, he'll give you that personal tour or set you up with one of the motorcycle guys, which, to be honest, don't tell Lee I told you this, even though this is a public podcast. You'd be better off talking straight to one of the bike guys, because Lee loves bikes, but I don't think he can get as in depth as you want to get with him as some of the restorers. So.
Yeah, maybe they even let me do a video on one, because I am starting this little video channel. Just like 2 weeks ago, we did our first real live Randy Pobst YouTube video.
Yeah.
Why would they not?
Well, I can
at least broach it.
Let me stutter my way through that one. I can tell you why they wouldn't, and I can tell you why they would. But all I can say is it doesn't hurt to ask. And if you know Lee and Lee knows you, and I know Lee knows your history, you might have a pretty good line to get in that way. And again, we can figure out, and I can see if I have any favors left over there. But they've been very good to me since I've left. So
great,
very good to me when I left, and very good to me afterwards. So there's no hard feelings.
So you got into bikes at 12? Did you say you got into bikes when you were 12 years old?
Yeah, mini bike, Tecumseh engine, steel frame mini bike.
Okay, like orange frame, purple seat. Yeah. Blue? Okay.
Mine is blue. Yep.
All right. So what was your first real bike? What was was it a dirt bike? Were you ever into the dirt side of things, or?
Not really.
No?
In Florida, back in 1972, when you were 15 years old, you could ride a 5-horsepower motorcycle on the street. And my generous dad, or maybe he wanted to get rid of me, he set me up with a bike. And it was a Yamaha GS7, which is an 80cc steel stamped frame, 2-stroke motorcycle where the engine hangs out in front all by itself. It was rotor valve. And it was funny, real funny bike that, looking back, I like even more because it had a high pipe. We used to call them scramblers when they had a high chrome pipe. But the rest of the bike looked like a cafe racer. It had a long tank, and it had a little seat with a kick up on the back, and the paint job and the racing stripe on the back of the seat matched on the tank.
This was a moped before mopeds existed, basically.
No, it was more than a moped.
It was more, okay. Okay.
But, that was my very first motorcycle.
Very cool. Very cool. And have you ever had any big? I mean, you've got the CB, but have you ever had any like modern 1000cc? I know you've probably ridden a couple of the just the stupidly, ridiculously fast like Hayabusa ZX13s. I mean, have you been on those?
I haven't owned one, but I've ridden them. Like I did a cool motorcycle show with Motor Trend called Throttle Out, and they did cars versus bikes. And so the deal was, I'm going to hot lap one of their motorcycles, and I've never, as much as I've ridden motorcycles, I have never done a hot lap on one. I've never tracked one. And then Zach and Ari were going to drive, actually it ended up being Zach, was going to drive a car, and we were going to compare our lap times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's super cheaty because they get in some AMG that's got stability control.
Super cheaty.
Yeah. I mean, it's got stability control. It's got ABS. And then I get on this R1S. No, Yamaha R1R, I think. What's
it's a silly fast bike.
A motorsport?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
my God. And that bike like that, well, it's cheaty, too, because now they have a wheelie control.
Yeah.
So I can just pin it, and I don't have to worry about the thing flipping over on me. It just keeps that front wheel about an inch off the ground, and it's glorious.
But Mach 7 on two wheels is still scary no matter what.
Yeah.
It's
and no lift shift.
Yeah.
Anyway, those bikes like that, the leader bikes, they're so powerful that it is exactly like, okay, what's the space show when they jump up to like warp speed or whatever speed, and all the stars turn into white streaks?
Star Trek, Star Wars.
I don't know if any of them or all of them.
It's warp drive.
Yeah, the bikes feel like that.
Yeah.
Everything except straight ahead blurs. It's incredible. I don't know how people race those things. And interestingly, in a motorcycle race, a good guy on a little 600 will run second or third in the leader bike class because they're just so powerful. They're so overpowered for something with a contact patch that big. Right?
It's amazing.
So I've ridden them, and again, that's another one where my survival instinct says I'll be in the hospital or dead if I ride one of these, or in jail.
That's why I haven't had a bike in 20 years. I literally, now that you've ridden them on track, though, do you have the itch to go back, or are you still?
Yes, you know why? Because I still feel great risk to my body. I don't think it's likely that I'll kill myself on a racetrack. I think it is fairly likely I'm going to break a bone. And when I was racing professionally, I could never afford to do that. I couldn't break anything. I still don't want to break anything desperately. Yeah. But I can't help it. I've got this, you showed that little drug injection.
Yeah.
I've got that with motorcycles. I want to ride them. I really do. And I stay careful. I wear all the gear all the time. And I would love to track a bike. And
you're street riding all the time. You're street riding.
I live well outside Atlanta, and I don't go toward Atlanta. I go the other way. I go north, right up into the country. From my house, it's 45 minutes to a genuine windy mountain road with no houses on it. And that, for me, is one of the greatest feelings in life. I can't resist.
Have you been up to the Dragon on a bike?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, many times. In fact, I had this very interesting experience, a couple of good Dragon experiences, but one, I'd been there many times on motorcycles, and the Dragon is very tight. A lot of time you're in second or third gear. That's part of what I like, is that if you ride it hard, a lot of times you're only doing 40 miles an hour or 25 in the corners.
Yeah.
And that tightness keeps the speeds down. So your crashes are more likely to be injury than death, although a lot of people have died there. But anyway, so I rode a lot of motorcycles before I ever went there in a car. And I had a Porsche 911, and I went there in 2001. I had a Porsche 911, plain old Carrera from Porsche, because that's when I was driving for them. And I did the road in a car, and this was a pretty good car, a 911. They were 300 horse back then. And yet every time I came out of a corner, second gear, 5,300 RPM, right on the torque curve, I would gas it, and it felt like it was absolutely tied to a tree. So lazy compared to the motorcycles that would just leap off the corner.
Well, yeah.
There was, whereas the bikes, you know,
Just
what?
rockets,
What?
yeah.
You
Gone.
What? But you know, don't do this, but I time myself.
Don't do this, but that's perfect.
A minute. This is over 11 miles. I was a minute faster in a plain old Porsche streetcar than in any motorcycle I'd ever ridden there.
Good Lord.
And it's because the risk.
Yeah.
I could whale that streetcar into a corner, and I wasn't worried about, you know, oh, did somebody just drop diesel oil here, or is something going to go wrong, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that could go wrong on that road.
So many things.
I'm not going to name names, but there was a group of race drivers, like professional drivers, that I was hanging out with at Daytona several years back, and they talked about they used to go up to the Dragon all the time, and they would set up like checkpoints, basically, where they would have a bunch of them across the whole road with radios that were two-way into whoever's was driving's helmet. And
hooliganism all the way.
They were looking for fastest lap time on the Dragon, and it's crazy, man. I can't in cars, yeah, but still, I mean, and they were doing it at night, so you could actually see. It's safer at night. Actually, it's safer at night because you can see the headlights.
You got it coming, yeah.
If you like, you can't during the day. There are places that are just totally blind, and you can't.
Many.
Yeah. And the other rule, and this is a rule that I follow whenever I'm on a road like that, and I hope you'll back me up on this.
Yeah.
Do not cross the damn yellow line. Don't do it.
All the way, man. I didn't put all this way to go straight.
Right.
Birds. I don't understand why people go to a windy road and then drive straight. Plus, if you cross that line,
you're endangering
Plus, you die. That's just all there is to it. And so what do? You got to apex late. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. Normal people don't understand late apexes, especially on a 200 horsepower, 400-pound motorcycle.
Yeah, and going back to bikes, it doesn't necessarily mean don't cross the yellow line with your tires. Don't put your head in the oncoming lane.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't do it. It happens all the time. I have literally come around corners on mountain passes. Angeles Crest. I've been on Angeles Crest in some really nice stuff and having a lot of fun. And you come around a corner, or in Carlsbad, you come around a corner and there's literally a biker with half his body in your lane.
Yeah.
And it's like, I got nowhere to go, and I'm in a car. You're going to get hurt.
Yes.
The front of my car is going to look like I hit a deer. You might not walk away. It's crazy that people do that. I will never understand. It's very, very reassuring to hear that you agree with that perspective.
Oh, absolutely. And I leave a margin, a wide margin. There's a reason that I'm still here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Motorcycles for 40 years. I like to go kind of quick, but that's about it. Just kind of quick.
Yeah.
And I've gotten away with a couple of messages from the universe where it was a little close. And so,
you ever had a big tank slapper?
We gave you that one. You might not get the next one. Yes, I get you.
Have you ever had a big tank slapper at high speed on a bike?
I've had a slide.
Okay.
Oh man, and it rocked, and it wasn't at high speed.
Yeah.
But I had a slide on. I was on my GS 1200. I have a BMW GS 1200, R1200 GS. Best motorcycle.
Lovely touring bike.
They feel so good. Their suspension is totally different than a normal motorcycle. They have these paralevers. They don't have forks, so the geometry is completely different. And it works. And I'd ridden all the way to Ohio and back, and I was really feeling my oats. And I was on a road called War Woman Road, which is outside of Clayton, Georgia. And they have a section that's like the Dragon, that tight and windy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I was ripping through their dragon pegs, which I almost never do on that bike until I get really, really comfy. And I got greedy with the throttle. And I got wheel spin and got sideways. And it snapped up and did this kind of whoa, 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 whoa. I hit my head on the windshield.
Oh, wow.
And didn't go down. And that was one of my universe, like, Randy,
it'll wake you up, man. It'll wake. I've only had one street bike, and I sold it. It was 2 a.m. I was going back to my house. It was 2 a.m. and I was running 12,000 plus RPM in 6th gear. And it was a ZX6. It wasn't anything fast, but it was still.
Yeah, I was only going 160.
Right. Or what? I don't know if it was 175 or it was 155, and I don't care.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, this feels too good. I like this too much. Boom! Just let out of it and went, that bike's for sale, man. Like, I'm with you. The 100 horsepower bike, like that Duke that you just got, did you just get it or have you ridden it a lot?
Just got it.
That's a beautiful, it's just a beautiful bike.
It's 72 horsepower.
It's perfect.
And,
it's perfect. It still squirts.
319 pounds.
Right.
It squirts. That's all I want is a squirt.
Yeah.
No more than a squirt. That does it for me, man. And I so far I love it. I want to soften it. I like compliance.
I agree. You and I need to meet at Barber. We need to meet up at Barber with some 250cc bikes and just go out and wring the neck of some 250s out on the track. That would be fun. I could do that.
Yeah.
The whole Mach 23 down the backstretch at Barber on a bike terrifies me to death. I don't need that in my life. I want roll cage. I don't even want to get in open wheel cars anymore. I want a roll cage. I want doors. I want fenders. I don't want to knock wheels with anything. How do you feel about the open wheel thing? Would you hop in an open wheel car and go?
Oh, yeah.
Go wheel to wheel? Okay.
I drove a lot of vintage Formula Ford at a charity event out in High Plains Raceway outside of Denver.
Yeah. With
the Rocky Mountain RMVR, Rocky Mountain Vintage Racing.
Okay.
Wonderful. And a bunch of guys let me drive their cars. And one thing that helps a car like that is it weighs 900 pounds.
Yeah.
And so when it does slide, it stops really quick.
Right.
If you're in an
especially a wide tire car, yeah,
that weighs 3,800 pounds, and you spin, you go a long way. You have a lot of momentum, buddy.
A body in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an equal or opposite. Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Good stuff. Last question. What's your favorite track?
Oh, that's easy. Nürburgring.
Really?
It makes every other racetrack look like a kiddie go-kart track.
Really? That's really your favorite track?
Oh, heck. It's so stupid fast. A lot of those corners, if you don't have 400 or 500 horsepower, you don't even get to the cornering limit.
Right.
Because they're gentle. And it's in a league all of its own. Now, if we come back down to reality, in North America, I'm a huge fan of a kind of an obscure track called Mont Tremblant up in Quebec.
That's Stroll's place, right?
No, Ralph Lauren, isn't it?
It's Lauren and Lawrence Stroll. Actually, Lawrence Stroll was a Ralph Lauren guy.
Oh, okay.
And Stroll actually has I'll call it a castle up there at the track.
I believe it. I'm a huge fan of that track.
It's a fun track.
A couple other of my favorites, Watkins Glen. You know why? Because the turns are all banked, except for coming out of the boot. If you ever have trouble at Watkins Glen coming out of the boot, slow down more. You don't have the grip you do everywhere else. It took me about, 5 years to figure that out.
How many lovely blue Armco stripes did you leave on cars before you figured that out?
Oh, I've had them. I've had my share, buddy. You're right.
Everybody has.
When I design a track, and I hope somebody out there will bring me to design a track, I'm going to have no off camber and no decreasing radius. Because yes, they're great driving challenges, but no, your car feels like crap. It doesn't handle. It's not fun. My track is going to always be banked and always increasing radius and always be getting faster.
What
And
about
that's the most
elevation?
fun place you ever drove.
What about elevation change?
Oh, love it.
Okay, cool.
Elevation change is a huge, huge challenge because when you're going up, you got more grip, and when you're going down, you got less.
Yeah, I any track with elevation change is the track for me. I like blind apex too. I like, but we're coming at it from a little bit different angle. You know, having spent the time on track that you spent, you understand those things intrinsically now.
Favorite, Sean?
If I had to pick, it's very tough for me to pick. You're throwing me in the same situation I threw you in earlier. Probably Road Atlanta. Just because I've spent so much time there. I love Road Atlanta, and very high speed. I love everything. I love everything about Road Atlanta except for turn 7. Turn 7 can die. I just
toe the boot. It's got no camber.
Yeah, and it's like you always feel like you should be able to get to power about that much sooner than you actually do, and or can. And I never feel like I got all of turn 7. Road Atlanta, Mid Ohio, VIR are very close. In
Mid Ohio, lots of elevation, busy,
Mid-O.
lots of corners.
Love Mid-O. There's something about the keyhole and the run down to madness, and
yes,
that's intriguing to me. And then VIR, just because VIR is kind of a condensed, especially if you're running the Grand Course at VIR. That's a condensed Nürburgring.
I like the Grand Course with all those corners in the infield.
Yeah.
It's right.
It's crazy busy and tons of fun.
Yeah, and VIR's got too many straightaways. It's got that huge long back straight. It's essentially a long front straightaway. And then unless your car has 400 or 500 horsepower, the S's are a straightaway. They're flat out.
Yeah, if you're in a low horsepower car, the S's are flat, definitely.
Yeah. So you add the Grand Course, and you add a lot more corners.
The Grand makes it fun.
I'm with you. That's a good one. You know, it's a great sleeper track that not a lot of people know, especially on the East Coast, is Thunder Hill.
Thunder Hill's amazing.
I really, really enjoy Thunder Hill. I do that 25-hour race every year.
I've done some programs out there. I've never raced on it.
I'm sorry, what?
I've done some programs out there, but I've never gotten to race on it. It's an epic track. Yeah.
It's a great one.
Have you been to the Ridge?
Sorry?
Have you been to the Ridge?
I have, just recently with Lucky Dog Racing Series.
That track is epic.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, that track is epic.
Yeah, it is.
It's
and it's got a good straightaway. Every track needs a good long straight.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, oh man.
Do they have any support buildings or anything out there now? Because the last time I was there, it was literally like paddock, track, you're on your own.
Little buildings there.
Okay. Yeah, it's a cool track though. That and Pacific Raceway in Washington State. I don't know if you've ever been there, but the Pacific is the front stretch of Pacific is the drag strip.
Yeah.
That run down into the woods at Pacific. There's no guardrail. It's literally like there's no Armco, and the whole time you're going down the hill, you're like, if I get this wrong, it's just a tree and me.
Toast.
Fun.
But the sequence of corners at Pacific when you come back is amazing. They have just the right amount of elevation change, right?
Yep. Yeah, well, and then they've got your banks going down the hill into the woods at the end of the front stretch.
Oh.
They've got the bank corners that you love. It's literally a corkscrew of bank corners going down into the woods. And for programs, we had a lot of fun on that track. And I've done really naughty things in Grand Caravans on that track.
SCCA has a big race weekend coming up there. I was going to go to it. Oh no, they don't. It's been postponed.
Everything's been postponed.
Yeah, there's an SCCA Majors weekend that I went out for once. Scotty B. White brought me out. I drove a bunch of cars, and we were going to do it again, but now it's all postponed. Isn't that awful not getting to track?
It's terrible. Okay, now that you said that, I have to – I keep lying and saying one more question. Do you have any sim stuff at home?
Oh, no, not a lick, but I think I might have to do it. I've never been a sim driver. I mean, I started driving in 1972.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I've been involved in simulation for a long time, and we've had a couple companies that I've worked with.
Oh.
You've been in simulators that I've been facilitating over the years, like
Oh.
the Porsche hospitality during Petit Le Mans. There were a couple years that we had simulators in there, and I got to hang out with you, and it was just a lot of fun watching you lay it down in those. But I know that you've run lemons. You've run some lemons in the past, and
heck yeah!
They were very kind to get my company, Nemesis, involved in bringing lemons to iRacing. And we had the first Lemons iRacing event last night.
I visited. I saw it.
We need you in that field,
cool.
man. We need you. That was I was one of the commentators last night.
I heard you. You were great.
My God, that was so much
the
fun.
Cars are too good. You need lemony cars, but I know that would be hard to create those, right?
That's why I brought up Wreckfest at the end of it. You've probably never heard of Wreckfest, but there's a game called Wreckfest that's literally exactly what the title says, and it's very lemony. And the damage model, if you bang fenders, there are exhaust parts flying up in the air and fenders coming off and just wrinkled and yeah, we're going to try to do something in Wreckfest. But iRacing does provide a really good just environment to be able to get in and set up league racing like that. We had almost 200 drivers sign up for last night.
Wow.
And we only could get 62 in the field.
Guys, the Lemons community is
Huge.
Really into it. They're the kind of fun-loving people that would be all over that.
Yeah, we need to get you a wheel and pedal set somehow and get you out to one of these things. I think you'd have a blast.
No, I don't even have one. Isn't that awful?
We'll get you and Sean hooked up there. Sean's getting rid of his Alpha for a minivan so he can cart around to simulators. And maybe we'll figure out how to get him over to Atlanta when you're in town and bring you a simulator to give that a try.
I'm up for it.
One of the questions I had about the Lemons race, and I guess you either one of you can answer, the virtual Lemons race, like last night. You obviously can't do a $500 cap on it. How do you limit that? Is it you can only have like 5 megabytes that your car can be built out of so that you can't have too many add-ons? Or
I suggested that you could only have $500 in your simulator. I suggested that we limit the cost of the control set and the actual chassis to $500. That didn't go over well. We weren't allowed to do that. There's really no way to do that. But you can BOP the cars. You can add rewards weight, which all of us racers love.
Oh, yeah.
You could add rewards weight and balance fields that way. And then we didn't last night, but you can give people spec setups, fixed setups basically, to where they can't go in and tweak caster camber toe and shock settings and all the stuff that you can tweak on the real car. And that tends to balance the field too, just because, I mean, Lemons, let's face it, most people that want to run Lemons, they don't really want to practice. They want to hop in a car and have some fun. And simulation, especially like iRacing level simulation, setting up a car in that title is a full-time freaking job. I mean, you can sink tens, if not hundreds of hours in just dialing a car in.
Wow.
And it's crazy. But I mean, it's the same thing as real life, right? I mean, you're when you get to the point where you're looking for that last tenth, then it's a little caster tweak. It's a little shock, fast damping or slow damping tweak. It's a sway bar tweak. It's very sophisticated in that respect.
Are you saying you have 4-way shock adjusters?
If the car has it in real life, the car has it in iRacing.
Wow.
So literally, like the really high end stuff, like the Formula One cars, LMP cars, they have like 3-way adjustable shocks and dual spring setups, and it gets crazy. You can adjust your rear end ramp rates, on throttle, off throttle. Your diff rates, and it's everything is, if it's adjustable on the real car, it is adjustable in iRacing.
Wow.
And it doesn't necessarily work. Like, I couldn't take, if iRacing had your K-Pax Volvo in it that's behind me right now,
yeah,
I wouldn't be I just love 5 cylinders of Fury. Very good stuff. But I couldn't take a setup sheet that you guys had from K-Pax and sit down and plug in the identical numbers. It doesn't quite go 1-to-1 like that. But, if the car's understeering and I soften the front end, no matter how I soften it, you can dial some of that understeer out. And then the same is true for oversteer. You soften the rear end, you stiffen the front. And then it's the voodoo, the black magic is what I have always called engineers and crew chiefs anyway. They're black magicians. I don't understand multi-adjustable dampers. I don't. I can tell you what the car's doing. I'm good enough to be able to come in and say, this kind of opens another topic, Randy.
Does.
I literally can tell you what the car's doing, and I can come in and look at the crew chief and the setup guys and go, it's not turning here. It's not turning when I do this. It's turning too much when this happens. And I've always been a proponent of don't come in and give your crew chief or your mechanics things to do to mask your poor driving.
Yeah.
I do everything in my power to make sure that I am letting the car do what it can do. And then I come in and go, it really is doing this, and the data is going to show that, and I can prove it with brake force curves and steering angle and where I'm tipping in and cornering speeds, and we have data to back up what I'm saying. How do you translate that? Like when you hop out of a car and you're looking at a crew chief or an engineer, what's your strategy for actually saying this is what the car needs and these are the reasons why?
Any race car driver has got to be negative. When you're driving the car, you need to make that car faster. So the only way to make it faster is to find the places where it is the most slow, where it's the most wrong. So you've got to be negative. You got to look at everything that's wrong, the most wrong with it. This is not a good strategy for your family, but it works for a race car. And focus on that, because you cannot give your crew, especially on a race weekend, a list of 10 things. You've got to prioritize, or at least prioritize it. Also, most crew chiefs don't like talking much. And so they want it in as few words as possible. And I heard you saying some things that to me already sound good. When you're talking about a car's characteristic, it's doing something. It's very important if you as a driver can isolate it to, is it before I get on the gas or after I get on the gas? Yeah. Because those adjustments are very different, especially when it comes to the shocks. Or is it when I'm braking? Is it when I turn the wheel? I like to break a corner into 4 sections. You have kind of your braking and turn in. And then as you're finishing the braking and aiming at the apex, and then as you're beginning to apply power and accelerate, and then as you're exiting under full throttle. Those 4 segments. Now, if you as a driver can isolate this characteristic into one of those 4 segments, and a lot of times it can come down to understeer or oversteer. Yeah. Or bump. Yeah. And speed. Speed, bump, and where in the corner, which of those quadrants is this thing doing something bad? Like, oh, this thing's loose. It's oversteering like crazy. It's oversteering.
Where?
Where?
Right, exactly.
Almost to the exit under full throttle?
Yeah.
Are you turning in for the corner? These are very different things.
It drives me crazy when a professional driver can't relate that. It drives me insane when I see that.
Some guys are great drivers and they're terrible at setup.
They just can't explain it.
I hate it when I have one of those guys for a co-driver.
I mean, when you're sharing a car like that, and the other guy might be a rocket ship but can't relate what he's feeling back to the crew chief or the engineers, do you typically just go off of the way you set the car up and force them to drive around it? Or
well, if you have that kind of power, if you're the senior driver on the team, or I remember a team I drove for where I was the new guy, and they'd had a guy there who'd been there for 6 years, winning races. The car was horrible. The driver was fabulous. He really was.
Was it a Porsche?
tell the team, I said, we can be so much better.
Right.
They got tired of hearing my song over and over again.
Was it a Porsche?
They worked with me early on, let me do almost an entire 1 hour practice session, and I was trying to stabilize the car. It was super loose. And I was trying to stabilize it. And by the end of the session, I'd gone a little too far. It was getting pushy. I'm like, okay, we got to take some of that back out. I come in the next morning and the crew chief sets me down. He says, well, we talked about what the car is doing. We decided it's not working. We put everything back where it was. And I went,
dear God.
No!
We were so close.
And the rest
We were so close.
That was the tone for the rest of the season. And I did what I could.
Right.
When you work, it's like a marriage. You have a co-driver and you're a team. You're not a one-man show. You got to work with the people you got and get the most you can get.
Yeah. And
that's what we did. And we won races and it was good.
Was that car a Porsche by any chance? Was the car you're talking about a 911 by any chance?
Nope.
No? Okay. There was a particular car that used to run around in Rolex. It was a 911 that used to run around in Rolex that looked like a dolphin going through the corners. The car, literally every corner, it was just, and every other car going through the corner, dead flat and rotate and set and beautiful. And this one car, every track, and I don't want to name names or, but
996 or a GT3R.
Yep.
The early ones, they were bad about that.
Yeah, but I mean, you looked at the Racers Group cars, and they were flat, and you looked at a couple of the other teams, and they were really good. But there was that one particular team that I won't name, Orbit again. It's just like we just couldn't figure it out. It's like, okay, does the driver really like it like that? And if so, why? Because you could hear that it was steady state throttle. They weren't doing anything crazy throttle brake, and you could see them going like through the horseshoes at Daytona. Hands smooth the whole way around the corner, just like a Bronco, man. It's like that can't be right. It just can't be right.
From the outside, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's been so good to talk to you. I feel like we could sit here and do this for a long time.
I know, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, you guys.
Yeah, thank you for the time again, and we may reach out again. And
yeah, I think we've got some unfinished business. We're only scratching the surface.
There's a lot more bike to talk about too. I'm sorry that I drug you back in onto four wheels. I apologize.
A lot more cars too, by the way. I do have like 6 more.
Yeah.
Then we need to talk about that.
That 15-minute bikes added 45 more minutes to the show, so we've almost got 2 shows out of this. So
time flies. I hope listeners that you enjoyed it and that you're still here.
We just have to tease them. You can never have too long of a show as long as the topic stayed interesting. So again, we appreciate you, and maybe we look forward to you. I look forward to talking to you in the future and maybe having you back as a guest if we didn't take too much of your time today. So I'm out of here for tonight. Thank you.
I enjoyed it.
Thanks for your time, Randy.
DrivingGloves.com. Thank you.
Oh, and don't forget to look up Randy's new YouTube channel. Is that, do you know what the address is or the name?
Randy Pobst. YouTube channel, Randy Pobst.
Simple enough. He labels everything that. So, well, we look forward to talking to you again. Whatever.
John's forgotten how to talk.
Yeah.
It's a good thing we do a podcast, and you're not relied on to talk all the time.